Hollywood is touted as a magical place where dreams come true, where you can be a nobody one day and a star the next. However, if you scrub hard enough, you can see the grime embedded deep into the history of Tinseltown. The mystery of Brett Cantor's murder still haunts Hollywood like a ghost. He was the son of an influential music manager, Paul Cantor, who helped guide the careers of some of the biggest music stars in the 60s and 70s. Brett followed in his father's footsteps and became an A&R rep for Chrysalis Records. As a music promoter, he had a keen eye for talent and is credited for discovering bands like Rage Against the Machine. He was good-looking, charismatic, and dated Hollywood starlets, including Rose McGowan. By age 25, Brett was tapped by nightlife kingpin Steve Edelson to become a partner in the infamous nightclub Dragonfly. There he ran a popular hip-hop night called Riot and threw some of the biggest raves in Hollywood. On July 30th, 1993, Brett Cantor's life in the fast lane took a deadly turn. He was last seen alive leaving Club 435 North in Beverly Hills at 1 a.m. 3 hours later, he would be dead. Dragonfly, the new true crime podcast series, explores the unsolved murder mystery of Brett Cantor. We follow his life as a music mogul and the final days leading up to his death. The series includes exclusive interviews with his family, friends, and Rick Jackson, the original homicide detective assigned to Brett's case, and he provides an inside look into his investigation. Detective Jackson reveals how Brett's murder became the subject of renewed interest when O.J. Simpson's defense team tried to unsuccessfully tie his killing to the stabbing deaths of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. Through the harrowing details of the Dragonfly nightclub owner's final days, his murder, and the eerie aftermath documented by his family and friends, we reveal shocking new details in his cold case and the trail of clues the killers left behind. It's one true crime story you will never forget. Dragonfly, the Brett Cantor murder mystery, is now available for download via Apple, Google, Spotify, or our website at dragonflypodcast.com.
Hello listeners, and welcome to this week's episode of the Cult Vault. For December, we will be revisiting the troubled teen industry. If you are new to the podcast or missed my coverage on Synanon, CEDU and this industry overall, feel free to go back and listen to get an idea of the history of how this movement has warped into what we will be hearing about in this episode. I'll be chatting with brother and sister Geoff and Jenny, who both spent time within CEDU in various programmes. For more information on the troubled teen industry and to help push justice further, you'll find more information at #BreakingCodeSilence and breakingcodesilence.net. I just wanted to make a quick apology for my lack of correspondence and social media output. I've been physically a bit unwell for a while, but it's all for a good reason. I am excited to announce that my partner and I are expecting our second baby, and I've been struggling with a condition called hyperemesis gravidarum, which sounds like a Harry Potter spell, but it's not. It's just a fancy way of saying that I'm suffering with constant sickness and vomiting, like morning sickness, but just always, all the time. I've been spending some time in hospital receiving fluids and medication, but I do seem to be on the mend and doing a bit better. So I hope to pick up with the podcast at full speed, continuing with Patreon exclusives and my website after Christmas when everything is neatly wrapped up. But without further ado, here is Jenny and Geoff. So hello, Jenny and Geoff. I'm really excited to speak with you today. This is the first time that I've interviewed a brother and a sister at the same time and spoken about their experiences on the same subject. So you both attended CEDU at some point in your lives. Jenny, would you like to start by introducing yourself to our listeners and tell them a little bit about who you are?
Sure. I'm Jenny Bentz, and I'm a mother. I have a 17-year-old son, and I live with my boyfriend, Matt, and my two dogs, Raiden and Cletus. I'm a dog groomer. I absolutely love dogs. I find peace in being with animals. That's definitely one thing that I've learned after I left CEDU is that I've always enjoyed animals, but it's comforting to have them with you if you have some anxiety and whatnot. But yeah.
And whereabouts are you talking to us from today?
Reading, Pennsylvania.
And Geoff, are you talking to us from Pennsylvania as well?
Well, I'm driving through New York right now, but I live about 20 minutes from Jen in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Right. And what about yourself? Do you have any children or pets?
I do. I have a wife, Tanya, and I have a daughter who's turning 3 in November named Gracie. I got twin sons that are 17 named Eric and Colin, and my stepson, Tony, is 20 years old. And we have a dog too.
Cool. So you both have families, which is lovely. Are they, Jenny? Is your family? Are they familiar with your CEDU experience?
Yes. Obviously my brother and his kids and my son and my boyfriend, and actually one of my nephews, Colin, he's been really into this and, talks to us about it and is interested. And so he's a really supportive little guy.
And Geoff, that's one of your sons?
Yes, it is.
And that's really interesting because what age were you, Jenny, when you first attended CEDU?
I was 12.
You were 12, and what age were you when you left?
15.
15. So that's not far off Colin's age now, which is quite interesting, isn't it?
Right.
And Geoff, is that the same for you? Were you both sent there at the same time?
No, I was sent there when I was 16.
Right, which is closer to Colin's age. That's really interesting. I'm making a note to speak about that a bit later. 12 years old, Jenny, that's really young. I mean, why did your parents feel it was needed for you to attend a program like CEDU?
They actually sent me away for prevention so that I wouldn't do drugs, so that I would get educated on how to live and not make those decisions on using drugs. And I never used a drug in my life at that age, ever.
So you're 12 years old and your parents send you to CEDU because they are worried about the potential that you might use drugs?
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yes, that was their concern.
That's very strange. Was that the same for you, Geoff, or was there a different reason?
No, I was doing drugs. That's why they sent me, and getting into some trouble at school. And I think with that mindset and that fear that I put my parents in, that kind of encumbered them, to be, to think that was the best move for Jen, was to send her to avoid all this stuff. But, and she can contest to this. All that did was educate her on the dark side of all these things that she had never even experienced at that point.
Absolutely. 100%.
Okay. So is there a 4-year age difference between the two of you then? Were you sent to this program at roughly the same time?
No, we're 6 years age difference. Geoff's 6 years older than I am.
Okay.
And he was sent to Ascent first and then RMA. So we were separated for about 5 years, which killed me.
Okay. What, were you close when you were growing up?
Always.
Yes.
Always.
Oh.
Gets me choked up because when they sent him away, it just, that was my first panic attack I've ever had when they told me that they sent him away. It just destroyed me.
And how did that happen, Geoff? Do you know how your parents made that decision, and did they drop you off
at Ascent, or what did that process look like?
I didn't really have a nice transition. I kind of thought something was coming because, there was a different vibe in the house. I kind of snooped around, found like a military academy form. They were leaving, drug test kits on the toilet, because I was smoking a lot of marijuana at the time.
Okay.
So it was leaning that way. So the way it happened was one night, the middle of the night, I got woken up by two large guys coming in my room and, turning all the lights on and saying we could do this the easy way or the hard way. And I didn't even know what they were referring to. He said, just get up, get dressed, make it quick. And, took me outside, frisked me and everything before I got in the vehicle, and then just started driving. I didn't ask any questions, didn't really want to know or communicate at that time. I was just pissed off and shocked.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, were your parents awake at this time? Did they come down to see you leave?
Yeah.
And were you able to ask them what was going on? Did they give you any idea of what was happening?
I said, what's going on right away, because I thought somebody was, something happened to somebody in our family.
Yeah.
But no, I just.
Oh my God, I thought the same thing, Geoff.
Yeah. I looked at him and, my mom was crying and my dad was just standing there. And, I said, why the hell are you doing this? And I said, you know what, you're going to send me away. I said, when I come back, I'll be 10 times worse. And that's how we left. So from there, we drove to, I think, the Harrisburg airport and flew from there to Spokane, Washington, and then got in their vehicle there and had, I forget how long of a drive, it might have been 2.5 hours, I'm not sure, all the way out to that Ruby Ridge area where Ascent was.
Yeah. And was this Bill Lane and Associates that took you that night?
No, at that time in that area, they used Chuck Salent, which was the prevalent guy who was the bounty hunter. If people ran away, he would find them. There was kids who could made it all the way to Seattle, changed their name, dyed their hair, and within a month's time, he'd end up finding these kids and bringing them all back.
And when you were taken, were you handcuffed in any way or restrained at all?
I wasn't restrained. That's kind of where the warning came in, saying that they could do it the easy way or the hard way. They did show me handcuffs. That threat was definitely there.
Right. And Jenny, how did your experience differ when you were kind of taken to was it Rocky Mountain Academy you attended?
For me or for my brother?
For you.
The first place that I went to was Ascent. They started both of us off at the boot camp.
Yeah.
But one part about when Geoff got sent away was they had me sleep over at a friend's house, and it was a school night, and I thought nothing of it because we weren't allowed to do that during the week. But so that I wouldn't interfere, because my parents said they knew I would have come after those bounty hunters with whatever I have, because that's my brother. They knelt down by my bed and woke me up, and right away I panicked, thinking something happened to my grandmother or someone in my family. And they said, "Wake up, we have something to tell you. We're sending you to that place that your brother's at," because I didn't understand what I did. So I kept asking, "What did I do? I don't understand what I did. I'm sorry." All I could say is, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." And, then the escorts were there. And they said the same woman had to stay in there with me while I got changed, went to the bathroom and everything. And I can still picture my parents standing, as the sun's starting to come up at the house. And I look back at them, and that's, yeah, I can still picture it in my head right now.
And was this Bill Lane at this point when you were taken, or was it still the initial transport service?
I believe it was whatever my brother had.
Yeah,
Right,
I think
okay.
you had what, Brad Navarro's dad, and that's who I had as well.
Brad's
that's
dad
what
from
got me.
Ascent?
Yeah,
Oh my God, I didn't know they were all in it.
yeah. His dad was with Chuck Salam, and those were the two guys that took me.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It was definitely terrifying. You know, I mean, they obviously have handcuffs and all that stuff, but it was kind of like this, like if you corner a little baby rabbit, what do? They just stand there and freeze.
Yeah,
You know what
yeah.
I mean? It was very similar to that. It's the best way I can explain it. I was too afraid to do anything.
And
That's
how?
why they get you when you're sleeping, so you're unaware.
Yes, exactly.
And more compliant, I guess, as well. I mean, at what stage during your journey to Ascent were either of you told where you were going, why you were going, you know, how long you'd be there for, you know, whether you were like what would happen with your possessions, you know? I mean, Jenny, do you remember when they tried to explain any of these things to you?
No, they didn't speak a word to me. Yes, I can right now.
Okay. So you're 12 years old. You've been taken in the night. I guess the only thing that you had was the knowledge that you were being taken to the same place that your brother had been taken to.
Yes, that's correct.
And what is Ascent? For those that haven't listened to the coverage that I've already done on CEDU, how would you describe Ascent to people?
Hell. It's a boot camp. That was the worst part of it. I mean, everything was the worst, but this part was the worst. It was 6 weeks, as long as you behave and do what you're told. But people, these counselors, if you will, in your face, literally in your face, were spits flying, screaming at you, even if you did nothing wrong. If you're doing everything you're told to do, they will still do it and break you down and break you down and break you down and call you names. They would say that, you know, your parents don't love, they said this to me, your parents don't love you. They don't give a shit about you. They only give a shit about Geoff. They don't want you at all. Stuff like that. Like, they would focus on things that people would have issues with, but I didn't have any drug problems. I didn't have sex. I didn't do any of those things. So they just played into that factor. And that's mostly what I heard the entire time. And just that my parents don't love me and they don't want me.
Right. And how was the experience for you, Geoff? Was it similar to the things that Jenny's just mentioned?
Yeah, it was pretty ugly. Once the bounty hunters dropped me off at the top of the hill, and they performed their strip search, made me squat down, all that stuff. Gave me a pair of wool pants and a bright green shirt, and then had to hike back with the counselors. I don't even remember how far it was, but it was a good ways into the woods till you get to this little clearing, which is a small circle, and in the center, there's a kid sitting on a little piece of wood, a stump, he was on some sort of punishment. And then there were 2 teepees, a small mess tent, a wood corral, and an outhouse. Mm-hmm. And when I came up, there was a girl who was in a sleeping bag on the ground, bungee or ratchet strapped around so she could not get out. And that's where she stayed all day, all night. I think she, went to the bathroom in there. The mosquitoes were horrible there. They were, eating her face. I remember her being there for a couple of days. Her name was Lacey something. I can't remember her last name.
Oh my goodness, that's absolutely awful.
I had seen that done to someone else there as well. It's called the human burrito.
That's it. Yep.
So even though there's a 4-year difference between you both attending Ascent, they're still using the same techniques throughout.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. And Jenny, do you remember what happened on your first day at Ascent? Were you forced to take part in any group activities or anything?
That day was the worst day of my entire life. I was just terrified. The worst part was when I got there, the strip search. I was 12 and it was, my time of the month, so I couldn't wear tampons.
Oh gosh.
So in front of a group of men and women, I had to get completely naked and they said, strip. I said, I have my period. I can't. And they said, do it, strip, get your clothes off right now, and do squats around the entire room with men and women. And it was just
gosh,
very uncomfortable. And then after that, we walked over to the base camp, and I had seen the 2 teepees and everything there. And then I remember going into the mess tent to have dinner or whatever. And I was clearing my plate, and 2 of the staff members attacked me, cornered me. And when I brought the situation up to my doctor, she said I went into shock because they cornered me and just started screaming nonstop in my face, from head to toe. And I couldn't catch my breath because I was crying so hard and just so freaked out. The worst day ever.
That sounds absolutely terrifying. I can't even comprehend how I would react to that at 27 years old, let alone a 12-year-old scared and alone child that had been taken in the night by people she didn't know to a place she's never been before, to be subjected to those awful things. And then to be, I mean, the screaming as well. The hardest thing to believe about all of that was by the time you probably left, you were absolutely so used to that.
Yes.
Which nobody should ever, that should never happen.
It shouldn't happen. These people, a lot of them were ex-military. You know, some of them were drill sergeants, and they would go out of their way to force the issue. What they would have your parents do is write a letter of the reasons why they felt it was right to send you. You know, it's like an issue letter. You know, it was fuel for these counselors. So when you arrive, they can try and get you to react as soon as possible. When I was there in my first morning, they wake you up, they scream, you got 5 minutes, and you got to wrap all your stuff up, your sleeping bag, and everything's got to be neat. And everybody has to have it that way. And if it's not, they'll go in there and rip everything apart, throw it all over the place, and you'll have another 5 minutes and extra physical training until you get that right. And my first morning, they had a guy that got in my face because I guess one thing on my letter from my parents was, you know, that I had hit my dog, which I didn't beat my dog. I love animals and everything else like that.
He would never do that. He would never do that.
Yeah. And so this guy wanted to bait me with this, and he got in my face and he said, you know, I'm going to, you know, he said, if you touch my dog, I'll be your best friend. And he was like nose to nose with me. And so I said, F you. And then I noticed behind me 2 other big guys were coming up behind me. And I had seen, you know, what happened the day before. And I knew they were restraining people, like with a lot of force, like they would take people down, not with the intent of keeping them from reacting, but to physically slam them to the ground.
Yes.
Like, you know, like football tackle these people. So I knew what they were doing. So I just shut up from there on. And I just kept my mouth shut and observed, you know, to the best of my ability.
And do you think that a lot of the tactics that were used across the board at all the places that you visited within the umbrella of CEDU, all the tactics were used to purely make you compliant throughout your time there?
Yes, definitely.
Jenny, just while we're talking about Ascent, you mentioned something when we were talking about a different kind of experience that you had, which links back to the Paris Hilton documentary that I've just watched.
Yes, that's actually a funny story. My brother and my parents know all about this even before she turned extremely famous. I met her at Ascent, and we were in the teepees because we had to sleep in teepees, and we were talking one night, even though we're not supposed to speak at all. But she and I were talking, and so was another girl named Kylie. And Paris had just gotten back from her wilderness. What was that called, Geoff? Wilderness Challenge?
Yes.
Okay. She just got back from Wilderness Challenge, where they go out in the back with your backpacks for 2 weeks. And she got back.
That was called Course, I think.
Oh, Course. Yes. At Ascent was Course. And at or May it was Wilderness Challenge, right?
Yeah, you got it.
Oh, okay. So she had just gotten back, and she said that she had this thing called goat's beard, which is some type of like tree not moss as in damp, but like it's something on the trees. Anyways, she said if you smoke it, it'll get you high. And so she, like, we're all talking about it, and I said, yeah, I guess, why not? I'll try it because I'm here for no reason. May as well make it worth it. So we rolled it up in notebook paper and, smoked it. Nothing happened, of course, but there was another girl in the teepees that was awake and just didn't say anything. But then the next morning she ratted us out. So the 3 of us that were involved did a 4-hour PT, and I'm pretty sure it was on the 4th of July, but not 100%. But then the rest of the kids got to sit and watch us do the physical training for 4 hours straight. And Paris had to call my parents to let them know what happened because they were, blaming her or whatever. So my parents got a phone call from her. So now every time we see her on the news or whatever, we all giggle about it. And, I feel like an ass because I smoked goat's beard.
Were you similar in ages then when you first met her?
I was 12 and I believe she was 16.
Right, okay. And she was actually sent over eventually to Provo Canyon, which I believe is a place that they threatened CEDU residents with for non-compliance.
Yes, that was well known of that place. I heard a lot of nightmare stories about.
I actually didn't hear about that place until, recently, but she was previously before Ascent. Paris was at CEDU High School in California.
Right. So for those that haven't listened to the previous coverage, CEDU has a number of buildings located across different parts of America. Jeff, do you just want to go through sort of what the different buildings were and where they were located?
Sure. In California, their main start of the school was CEDU Running Springs, and then they created the CEDU Middle School up there as well, which was where Jen went after Ascent. Then they had Rocky Mountain Academy, which was pretty much cookie cutter for CEDU in California. And then down the road, and this is in the middle of nowhere, Bonners Ferry, Idaho. There's nothing around. But down the road, they had Boulder Creek Academy, BCA, and that seemed like more kids that had like more severe mental issues or
social
issues, a lot of heavy medicated stuff. NWA, Northwest Academy, was like kind of like a transition. It's like a cross between Rocky Mountain Academy and Ascent, so
yes.
The hardcore presence was still there. They had a little more rights and freedoms, but not many. It was still a base camp setting, with a very basic, cabins. And I think that's it.
Yeah, Jeff, as I recall, that's what yep.
And I know that thousands of children were put through these various different programs across America from one time to another in the so-called troubled teen industry. So for people that haven't listened to the CEDU coverage previously on the podcast or know anything about it, these programs were set up for troubled teens who were at risk or, being sent there by judges or parents as a last resort almost to some type of negative behavior. The troubled teen industry has generated millions of pounds for different companies across America, at the expense of children and at the hands of abusers, basically, that were running these different sites. So it's my understanding that it's extremely expensive to put one child through one of these programs, and if you both attended various programs over a number of years, Jenny, how did your parents afford to pay for all of these things?
Well, our father is a pilot. He's an airline pilot, a captain.
Okay, right.
So that's how
it had to do with, I think they had a college fund for us, and that's where it went. Because, Mom said that they were not going to be able to afford me going for more than a year, and it was like cold cut, and then they just made the decision, and I'm pretty sure that's what it ended up being, that our college funds were put to keeping us housed at RMA.
It was extremely expensive for the escorts, the bounty hunters that woke us up in the middle of the night and took us. I believe they were $5,000 a piece for each person. So, and that's each time you go. So when I was escorted from my house to Idaho, that's $10,000. Then I got escorted from Idaho to California. There's another $10,000. Then when I got escorted from CEDU in California to Idaho, that's another $10,000 plus however many times Geoff did it.
Right. So Jenny, just talk us through sort of the timeline of different places you attended and where they were located. So you're 12 years old and you arrive at Ascent. How much time do you spend there before you move on?
I was at Ascent for 6 weeks because I did everything that they said. So it was for 6 weeks. And then after that, I went to CEDU Middle School in Running Springs, California, on the top of a mountain where there's like really nothing around, just mountains. I was there at CEDU Middle School from 12 years old until the day I turned, I think it was the day I turned 14, that I was old enough to go to Rocky Mountain Academy in Idaho. And then they ended up skipping me a year in education because I was so young, even though technically I have a 6th grade education level, because that was the last thing that I had completed before I left, and they really didn't teach us anything at all.
And so what age were you when you finished with all of the CEDU programs all together?
15 and a half.
15 and a half. So you're coming up to your 16th birthday.
Geoff, yes.
What did the timeline look like for you?
When I got sent to Ascent, I was 16 years old. It was in April. Yeah. I think it was the end of April, because I graduated from Ascent, June 6th, and they took me over to RMA. And then I was there and I graduated December of 97. And I was 19 at that time.
Right. Is that quite an older age for somebody to be finally graduating?
It was pretty common, actually.
Yeah, so it's common.
Yeah. There was a few people who ended up being there. Now, there's somehow, I guess, parents were able to get some sort of court order signed that waived the rights of the kid when they turned 18 to make their own choices, but not in all instances. Like, I decided to stay, which sounds crazy, but why I decided to stay had a lot to do with when I started there. There was the older kids there that kind of looked out for me, and some of them, and some of them weren't really buying into the whole program, but they were just trying to look out for people, coming up in the whole thing. So
yeah, like 12-year-old girls.
Right. So when I got to this point, I was dead set on leaving for sure. And then I just felt guilty.
Yeah.
So when you both move up from Ascent to, well, I know that it was different for you, Jenny, going over to CEDU Middle School. The CEDU Middle School curriculum, I do with inverted commas, do these include the raps and the smush sessions as well?
Yes.
Right, okay. So when you both move up from Ascent to Rocky Mountain Academy for Geoff and then CEDU Middle School for you, Jenny, you're both then thrown into rap sessions.
Yes.
Yep.
Geoff, just talk the listeners through the experience of your first rap session.
Well, basically, you're coming into this campus, and they'll guide you right into one of these different rooms that they'll have set up, all throughout the campus. And you'd have, 15 to 20 kids, 1 to 2 counselors, and it would be, highly aggressive, verbally, people screaming right away, kids like screaming at the floor with like snot running out of their noses and all this stuff, and that's what they were really going for. They were pushing. That was good for kids to do this stuff, and it was just a crazy scene to be in the middle of nowhere in this room where you can't get anywhere away from the insanity that was going on.
And what was the primary aim for the end of the rap session? What was the overall objective?
Control.
Well, for the person in question to break down and scream at the floor, do their work, get all the feedback, have pretty much everybody in the room, ripping that individual, and then just walking out beat. I think it was a person who was on a restriction, like a full-time, and that was, that's the goal. Those people,
right,
take priority first and are hammered for a good portion of the time.
Okay, so a restriction or a full-time is basically somebody that's fallen out of line with the rules within
Correct.
the program. And Jenny, what was your first rap experience? How do you remember it?
To be completely honest, I do not recall my first rap experience.
I think that's quite a familiar story with a lot of the younger CEDU members that I've spoken to.
Yes, I definitely remember my first profit, but when it comes to the first rap, I definitely don't remember. Some of it's a blur, but some of it's like right in your face, like details.
And did you become familiar with the structure of the rap sessions by the time you moved back over to Rocky Mountain Academy?
Oh, absolutely.
So you were almost like a well-versed professional when you enrolled finally old enough to attend Rocky Mountain Academy.
Yes, you're 100% correct. I just realized when I was there after I left Ascent that I need to do whatever they say, like even the crazy stuff that doesn't make any sense. I just had to do it in order to keep them away from me and not attack me as much.
Right.
Because if you're quiet, they'll attack you more. And that would have been my thing. I would have been quiet because I didn't want to deal with this stuff, but yeah. They'll attack you if you're quiet. They'll attack you for anything. So it really, I don't know. I feel like I lost, I wasn't myself there. Obviously a lot of people weren't, but I turned into their puppet, and I feel awful about that because that's just not my style. And, I just, it's just not like me.
Did you have anybody in your Ascent program that was held back for not completing everything correctly in the 6 weeks they were there?
Oh, I'm sure there were a few people. I can't remember the specifics of who it was, but yes, absolutely. They will definitely hold you back if you don't do exactly what they say. So that's why I wanted to get out of there as fast as possible. I knew my parents would not pull me from the program. I knew they wouldn't bring me home until I completed everything because my brother went there first. Right. So that's how I knew. So that's why I never tried to run away. I never tried to do anything that I thought about. Just play the game.
And did you ever cross paths during your time with any of these places?
My brother and I?
Yeah.
Oh, no. He came to my graduation, if that's what you want to call it, from the boot camp at Ascent. And, I couldn't let go of him when we hugged. I just wish that at least if we had to go through that, we would have been together, but we weren't. We were separated the entire time.
Did you know, Geoff, that Jenny was attending the programs when she got enrolled?
Yes, my parents told me that that's what they were doing, and I didn't hear of anything that she was really doing to go to that point, to go to that extreme, other than they had a fear, and it was all fear-based. It was a tough thing to imagine her being sent and going through everything I went through, especially at her age.
Yeah.
They kind of dulled it down with the idea that she was going to the middle school and it's not anywhere near as aggressive as this, even though they didn't really know the level of aggression that was involved.
Yeah, of course. That's the thing. I mean, you would have said, like, I don't think it's a good idea because you don't really know what's going on here. And then from what I've heard, a lot of other survivors' parents would say, well, it's not really that bad because, nobody was really being given the whole truth of the situation.
Yeah, not at all. The parents didn't know.
They were given a handbook. I guess, initially as a guide on how to deal, with when your kids try and tell you, well, they want to leave and it's a bad place and all this other stuff. They're told to ignore it, that it's just something that everybody's going to say. There's nothing behind it, just they're homesick,
That us kids would be, it would be manipulating just to get them to take us home, which in all actuality, it would have been the truth. But they told the parents that everything we would say basically is a lie.
Yeah, well, I guess when you first look at the brochures and you first, get the, I'd call it propaganda, wherever you're accessing it from, you would kind of believe these professionals, again in inverted commas, because they are supposed to be the ones that taking care of your child's welfare, and you expect them to be, well educated with credentials and qualifications, and they just, as far as I know, were not any of those things.
Absolutely.
So it's my understanding that the majority of the staff there had no formal training or education or qualifications in any kind of education or teaching or therapy. It's really difficult to, it's difficult to believe in the credibility of the staff members, but nobody knew this at the time. So when your parents are like, well, it's the adult's word over my children's word, and I've sent my children there for a reason, I'm probably more inclined to believe the adults, which is awful, but that is probably human nature, what most parents would do.
I agree. That's 100% correct.
Right. And Geoff, do you remember after your first rap session going into your first smush session?
Vaguely. I think I tried to block a lot of that out,
Yes.
So I'm back and forth with some of these memories. The more this is coming out, like the more I'm recalling the different terminology and everything else. I just remember the whole idea of it was just pretty creepy and weird.
Yeah. And because they, it's really unfortunate that your parents used the college money for you both to attend these places, because there was actually no formal education given. As you said, Jenny, you've actually only got a 6th grade education on paper, and the curriculum that this place boasted was an emotional growth curriculum. Is that right?
That was what it was based on, was the emotional growth, but they also, when it had to do with education, what they say education is, that they would say that I would be on honor roll the entire time. And I was not on honor roll. Number one, they skipped me an entire grade level just to go to RMA because I was the youngest, and they didn't teach us like anything education wise. It was ridiculous. So coming home and having to go to high school, it was just embarrassing.
Right. So you have attended
touched on stuff, but it was very watered down. Like,
Yes.
I remember they had like American Lit, and they had Algebra 1 and Spanish, but it was really, really thick.
Right.
Remember Geoff, do you remember Greg Burton? I think that was history.
Yeah.
That was like a really nice guy, but he would just show us the Last of the Mohicans movie a lot, which I was fine with because the movie's great and we never really got to do anything like that. So, that's basically what it was.
So upon leaving, Geoff, did you have to go out to attain any level of formal education?
I didn't. And as we were talking about this, and then as I was listening to your other podcast with Michael, I'm thinking to myself, well, I got a supposed diploma from this place. Is it really legit? I don't even know. I put it on resumes before. Don't know what credibility it really has.
And is that the same for you, Jenny?
Well, basically, I've never admitted to anyone that I have a 6th grade education level, but I did not complete high school when I came back home and went to Wilson. I went to Wilson High School for a year, and number one, I didn't understand anything. But number two, I also once I got home and was free, I was just so ready to, do my own thing and just not do what I was told.
Yeah,
so
of course.
It was those two things together that, it just didn't work out so well with high school. So I did not graduate high school.
So just going back to rap sessions before we talk about Profit. Jenny, you said that you'd never tried drugs. You didn't know about drugs. You didn't know about sex. Did you end up admitting falsely to any of these things later on just to have people leave you alone?
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, see, I had to think really hard about how to come up with something without making a lie up about a person, because that's just wrong. So yes, I did. I actually read back on one of my journals that my mother found, and it said something, about me graduating Ascent and how much I loved and missed Geoff.
Yeah.
I don't, why would I? And then number two, I said how I really wish I could have a cigarette right now, but I'm going to be fine. I don't need it. I tried cigarettes. I stole my dad's cigarettes and I tried cigarettes, but that's it. There was no addiction. There was no, anything like that at all. It was something to say to get them off my back, because being someone that didn't have any issues with drugs or sex or violence, anything like that, you have to come up with something because they won't leave you alone. I mean, hours and hours of them drilling you and you have nothing to say. So you just kind of have to make stuff up.
And a lot of the terminology and language that you used, was that stuff that you picked up whilst you were there and would not have known about otherwise at 12 years old?
Oh, absolutely. I had no clue about people being molested. I didn't know what that meant. So when someone was talking about that in a Profit, I since I didn't have anything to say, I said, well, am I like that? Because I told my cousin, my little cousin, that she's cute. I didn't understand.
Mm-hmm.
That stuff didn't make sense to me.
Geoff, you mentioned that you had actually been trying some types of drugs when you were enrolled into Ascent. So what did your rap content look like? Did you speak about the stuff that you had been taking part in, but did you also embellish with things that were false as well?
No, I didn't embellish, because I had a pretty decent long laundry list that came along with me with that letter that my parents wrote. So there was some content there.
And you mentioned, Jenny, you remember your first Profit. Can you just explain to the listeners what a Profit is and what your first experience was like?
The Profits are, you have your peer, Geoff, what was that called? Peer group?
Peer group, yep.
Peer group. Okay, so you have a peer group, and what a peer group is a group of people, a group of kids that you go through the Profits with together each time, the same kids, and you do a lot of things together, and you will graduate from the program together. So my first profit that was at the CEDU Middle School. It was called Truth. And that's when someone mentioned something about being molested, because you're supposed to bring out all of your secrets and things that have happened to you or things that you have done, you know, that you shouldn't have. You need to confess,
Right.
stuff like that, all about confessing. And, you know, as I said earlier, someone brought it up about being molested and I just didn't understand. So it was really difficult for me to go through these things because I just didn't have anything to say. But there was the Truth, which was one day. There was the Children's Prophet, which focuses on the things that you've done in your life that damaged your inner child. Brothers, Geoff, was that next? The Brothers.
I think
Prophet?
the Brothers, and then the Discovery 3-day deal.
Okay, yeah, and then there was the Summit. And then certain ones would progress into more intense things, like the last one, which was the Summit. That was a 5-day experience, and they definitely deprive you of sleep and food and just made you do some embarrassing things and crazy things that you would never even think of. It was just
So
a
like
nightmare.
one last big hurrah of all the horrible things they've put you through, just kind of put into 5 days of total chaos.
5 days of nonstop craziness. You know, I remember the last one, which was the Prophet, or I'm sorry, which it was a Prophet, but it was the Summit, and it was 5 days. And I remember them making me put this outfit on, which there were ballerina slippers, which were way too small. I couldn't fit my feet in them. And they said, you have to do it. So I had to squeeze my feet into these tiny children's size ballet slippers and put on some type of tutu and prance around this room. And they called me Tinkerbell because I just try to be happy and, you know, go about my way and blah, blah. Like they try to associate you with some type of a character. So I was Tinkerbell. So I had to do this in front of all these people, which it didn't make sense to me. And they would keep making me do it over and over again until they knew I felt free and I was feeling peace, which was absolutely ridiculous.
I mean, I don't really. I'm sure the staff believed in what they were trying to achieve, but I don't understand what they were trying to gain from it. From an outsider's perspective, I can't wrap my head around any of it. Geoff, was there any particular part of any of your profits that you experienced that you can remember clearly?
That's a tough one. There's a lot of blocks in there too, but the one that I do remember, it was called the I Want to Live, and you know, you'd be on the ground on all fours, and the staff would like push you down and shove your shoulders like they're trying to shove you into a grave.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, that was a little over the top. There was a lot of stuff that was. It was just kind of tough to keep track of it all. But
like an actual grave.
Yeah, like an actual grave.
So
yes.
you're outside and somebody's dug a hole in the ground and they're trying to put you in this hole in the ground.
No, it was actually it was to impersonate something like that. It was in a room when you were supposed to be on all fours, and the idea was they're trying to push you into a metaphorical grave.
Oh my goodness,
That's right.
terrifying.
Jeff, I forgot about that.
What was it like at night times as well? I mean, in the dorms that you were based in, could people just come in, like, could staff just come in at any point?
Of course.
Yes. They had night watch that would come in and walk through in the middle of the nights when you're sleeping in your dorms. They had just like a local they hired as a night watch, you know, who would come in, make sure there was like wood in the furnaces, walk through the dorms, shine flashlights on each person in each bunk, and you know, make the rounds.
Body count,
yeah.
And do you remember a time where there was ever somebody missing from a body count?
I remember when kids were running away. Yeah.
I was actually going to ask about that a little bit later on, but Jenny, I just wanted to go back to something you said earlier. When you said that you'd never tried drugs, did you end up actually trying drugs once you'd left the program? Because I'm genuinely just interested about the efficacy behind the program that they were running. Because if you went on to, you know, to try recreational drugs, then what I think that just disproves everything that they put all of you through, if that makes sense.
Oh, it makes sense. You're 100% correct on that. When I came home, I started to smoke weed, which, to be honest, is fine. It's weed. But, then I'd continue on and go a little further with things, try acid and coke. And then at one point in my life, at first it was just to try it and see what everybody was talking about when I was at school. But then at one point in my life, it all of a sudden hit me how uncomfortable I was in my own skin. Like, I was fine when I first got home because I was just so happy and excited to try everything and be home and free and be a teenager. But then it got to the point at, I don't know, maybe my 20s, low 20s, that I felt so uncomfortable in my own skin just to even talk to anybody that I would have to get high to go throughout my day, because I just felt like a piece of shit.
Right.
Like, I just did not feel comfortable around anybody.
So it's actually probably from attending these programs that you fell into taking recreational drugs.
100%, yes. Because I'm sure if I would have never went there, that I would have definitely tried weed and mushrooms, stuff like that. But I would have never been, like a heroin addict at one point in my life. So that was definitely 100% had to do with my feelings about that, because of how I felt about myself.
Right. And I know that there's a lot of gaslighting that happens with CEDU survivors, and people come out of these experiences and for years have that self-blame mentality, which you're talking about here. Geoff, is that similar to what you experienced when you left the programs?
It is. It was a really tough transition, because you come out of a place like that in this tiny bubble, and you're an open wound. They've broken you down, and your whole mentality has changed. You haven't been a part of normal society for that amount of time, and especially as a kid, I had a really tough time readjusting. I actually ended up getting back into drugs for a little bit too, until I could, see things more clearly and, start understanding why I was doing what I was doing, and invest a little more interest into why, what was fueling, the reasoning behind starting to do drugs again.
Right. And I mean, what steps did you take to prevent yourself from falling into that sort of dark hole of substance abuse?
Well, it was just a point of pulling myself back out of it, as I gotten older, I had my sons, and, they were really important, and still are very important to me.
Do you think that's the same for you, Jenny? Starting a family has kind of given you a new direction to take?
I got pregnant with my son Andrew when I was 17. I actually could not wait to have a baby, because I just wanted to start my own family and have someone love me unconditionally the way that I'll love them. And it was rough, because I was so young, and it was with definitely the worst person you could pick. So I basically raised Andrew on my own, and also with my mother's help the entire time. And that's the part that I feel the worst about, is that, the using of the drugs, and while having Andrew. Yeah.
You do understand, though? I hope you've had the opportunity to speak to somebody. I know you have Geoff to speak to through about all of these experiences, but you do understand psychologically what happened to you now.
Yes.
So you have to, at some point, you have to take a step back and let that guilt go, because you were a victim of something completely heinous that should have never been inflicted on you. And obviously I can hear that you're getting upset, and it's actually making me a bit upset to speak about, I'd imagine. But I hope you are fair to yourself, and you give yourself an opportunity to take a step back and realize that you didn't choose to be subjected to any of those things that happened to you. And that goes for both of you as well.
Absolutely. Now at the point that I'm in my life now, I'm doing very well. I work very hard, and I have my son, my boyfriend, my brother, my brother's wife is my best friend, my nephews, my niece. Like, those are the most important things in my life, and I focus on that, and it really helps.
I mean, I've spoken to a few people that have written memoirs and testimonies. Michael himself, was working on a screenplay, which just, it was a way for people to talk through their experiences and just kind of bleed it all out, almost out of their systems, and have a place to just put it down and lock it away. I'm not sure if that's the way for everybody to approach it. Obviously Paris Hilton's just on her documentary, which a lot of it focuses on her brand, but some of it definitely does look at the troubled teen industry and the problems with it. But it sounds like you've got a really wholesome unit now. Geoff, do you feel wholesome in your situation? Do you feel kind of like that you can talk through these things with people and kind of gain a level of trust and know that people understand where you're coming from?
I do. I definitely feel very fortunate. I always wanted a family, and very, very thankful to find some peace in me, as and to have these people, in my life gives me.
And Jenny, have you spoken to your parents about everything that happened and managed to kind of have a conversation to let them know the sorts of things that happened? Have you managed to gain their perspective on what it was like for them, finding out obviously everything that had happened and how they felt at the time you were both gone?
May I say something quick before I answer that question about what Geoff had said? And I wouldn't say this just to toot my brother's horn. My brother really is the best father, husband, brother, uncle that you can ask for. He really, really is. He is what we didn't have. I think he learned from our dad what he didn't want to be and how to treat his kids. And he's just amazing. Like, he really turned it around into a good thing, and he's a great person. So that is a good thing. I had to say that because he's like a cornerstone in my life that helps me get through everything.
It sounds like, Geoff, you had those fatherly instincts way before your time anyway, by deciding to stay on and help the younger members of CEDU.
I did. It was such a lonely time, and without other kids helping me, I don't think I would have made it. So I couldn't pull myself out, selfishly. I had to end up being honest with myself and my reasons as to why I wanted to leave, and then, a lot of the younger people looking up to me, I just couldn't abandon it.
So have you managed to have a conversation with your parents at all, and what were their thoughts and feelings around the whole situation?
That subject is just an annoying, excuse me for my stuffy nose, an annoying mess. Like, I don't know. I kind of touched on it a few times throughout the years to my mother, because she's the only one that's around. Her father, remarried and lives in a different state, and he doesn't really communicate with us that much or visit. So basically from my mother, over the years, I tried to tell her some things here and there and to see what she would say. And she just didn't believe it. She would say it saved Geoff's life, which, I know Geoff had learned some things from there, and that's great. But also he was damaged from that. But for me, it did nothing but damage. And I tried
denial for her personal guilt is the reason why she wants to cling to the brochure image of the whole thing.
Yeah. Yes, I agree.
I think that's quite natural as well, isn't it? I think it's very difficult for people to take ownership of things that they might potentially feel guilty about as well. So I think a lot of that is human nature. It's just interesting that some of the people I've spoken to have sat down with their parents and said, you know, this is what happened. And the parents have been like truly gobsmacked and shocked about the things that were going on. But even then still say that I honestly don't know what else I would have done, because I felt like this was an absolute last resort. They are
victims too, because they were spoon-fed complete propaganda, you know, and and don't get me wrong, there was some positive things to parts of the program, but the entire idea and the basis of it all is completely out of whack, you know?
Yes.
So
yes, Geoff, I agree.
The thing is, they don't know what the hell they paid for in reality. When we explained what Ascent was to my mom, she said she never would have sent us there if she would have known anything about, anything like that.
The parents don't have a clue. They had no idea at all. And that was part of the whole thing, that's why they made us smile. And that's why we couldn't say we want to come home. If we were on a phone call, they would, if you say, I want to come home, or try to, tell your parents what's going on, they would cut the phone call off.
Yeah.
And all we wanted to do was speak to our parents, because we missed them so much that we would just, talk about whatever, just so we could hear their voice, just.
And the other thing with that, in the entire time that we were gone, damn near 3 years, we only came home 4 times.
Yes.
3 visits.
And what happened during those visits home? Did you attempt to have a dialogue with your parents about, why you shouldn't go back?
No way.
It fell on deaf ears. And if you would do something like that, then your parents can report that back to the staff that you're, trying to lean towards leaving and pushing them. And, so.
Our parents were the type they're the type that, do exactly what they're told. That's how they are. And that's how they were with the programs. So I knew better. I knew, especially from Geoff's experience, and then with mine, to not ever say anything, to just put a smile on and say everything's great and I'm good, blah, blah, blah. But there's no way. There's no way we would ever say something.
So you were allowed to have these phone calls every 2 weeks, and how long did they last roughly?
10 minutes, right, Geoff? Oh, 15?
Yeah,
okay.
15.
And there was a staff sitting in the room with you to monitor the calls, of course.
And it's my understanding that if you were to kind of try and speak about the things that were happening, they would phone your parents back later to let them know that you were simply manipulating your parents.
Yes.
Yeah, they would just put it on the kid and say they were, they're just having a bad day and all that stuff. Same with if you were sending a letter to a loved one, you could not seal that letter. They would read the whole thing. If they didn't agree with it, they'd throw it in the trash. You'd have to write another one.
Absolutely. So you could never have an honest conversation with your parents about anything. You just had to put the front on so you could go throughout the years as fast as possible, even though 3 years was not fast at all. So you could get out. That's it.
Yeah. I'll ask you this question first, Jenny. Is there any staff member that you particularly remember? And if there is, why do you think that is?
Oh, yeah. There are 3 that I can think of in a negative way and 1 I can think of in a positive way. There were two at Ascent, the boot camp, Pat and Justine, and they were the worst thing that I ever came across in my life. And I just thought it was so awful, the things that they did to people, but especially to me. They were the ones that cornered me that night, my first night. And I just have so much hate in my heart and everything in me for those people that did that, because they just enjoyed like scaring the shit out of these kids. Like, they got off on each other with it. Yes, whoever could, bully the kids down the most and break them down the most was the coolest out of the group. It was awful. It was horrible. So those two I remember from Ascent, and I will never forget them as long as I live. And then at Rocky Mountain Academy, I was terrified. I mean, I would literally shake.
Sheila?
Yes, Sheila.
Yep. I would.
Oh my God, and not only was she scary verbally, she was a brute. I mean, she had the body and size of a linebacker. She was huge. And that voice of hers, oh my God. And she just would not let up on me or anybody else. That
she could be really relentless. Yeah.
She terrified me. She absolutely terrified me. Like, we were able to request people for raps, like put in a little anonymous or a slip into the box and say you want to request someone for a rap that you have to talk to them. I would request another staff member or someone else that wouldn't be in her rap just to avoid her. I would shake.
Yeah, a lot of people did that.
Yes, I would shake uncontrollably on a Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, because those were the rap days. And I could not control.
That's where a lot of our anxiety came from.
Yep.
This pre-rap crap.
Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, nonstop, 3 hours. It was just the worst feeling.
You've painted a Miss Trunchbull picture for me of this Sheila woman.
Ugh.
Would that be accurate from Miss Trunchbull from Matilda?
That's times 1,000. Yes.
That's the image that you've painted for me with the voice
pretty much
and the stature.
Just
Geoff,
such a bully.
What about you with your staff members?
Well, with RMA, I agree with Jen. Sheila. And like, she would enjoy that. She liked being the powerhouse too. And I think there was still a good side to her too, which I think there's good sides in damn near everybody. But
not Pat and Sheila.
Some of those, not. And people at Ascent, there was a lot of dirty, nasty people there. And one that got in my face that first morning and tried to break me, his name was Clark. I don't remember his last name, but
God.
He would badger me, and he picked me, and he would try and turn the knife on me every chance that he could.
I forgot about him.
Him for me.
This sounds like Michael's experience with Russ Decker when he speaks about his experience with him. And I just wanted to clear up for all the listeners, especially if there's any CEDU survivors listening, that your last name is no relation to Rudy Bennett.
No.
That's right.
Oh my God, no. We saw that on the internet, and Geoff and I bugged out about it. I'm like, how in the hell does this guy have the same last name as us when our name is it's extremely rare? And I'm like, oh my God, no way.
Yeah, because he's been described as one of the worst as well. So
I've heard that. Yeah.
I've read the stories online.
Jenny, you mentioned a staff member that you think wasn't all bad. Was this the guy that used to show you The Last of the Mohicans?
Oh, no, that was actually a good guy. That was supposed to be a teacher, but Greg Burton was a good guy. But when I was at CEDU Middle School, there was this man that was so nice to me, and he was just great. Craig Grimm, he was so nice, and he didn't do the attack stuff to us. You know what I mean? Like, he taught me how to fly fish, because I love fishing. He taught me how to fly fish on a basketball court there so I could learn, because, we couldn't really go out anywhere. But he was just a good guy. I think it was just, he was doing it for a job to have some money, but he was good to us kids. Yeah. And that meant the world to me. So when I had to leave to go to Rocky Mountain Academy and transfer schools, he even played a special song for me, and just said how much he's going to miss me. And I truly felt that. So it was nice to have one person, kind of looking out for you. But then again, it was really hard to leave him.
So you mentioned before that you think that some of the staff members were trying to almost outdo each other with the level of abuse that they could inflict on the residents there. Do you think that the staff, for the most part, enjoyed the experiences that they were inflicted on people?
I think some did,
yes.
and some didn't. I think, you can look at it in many different ways. There's some people that get into positions of authority because they have past issues. They might have been bullied as a kid or whatever. Some cops go that way, but it doesn't mean all cops are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there was a lot of people like that with those counselors. Some had true good intentions and, believed the whole philosophy that had been put onto them because they were, forced to go through the program just like one of the students. Do the same prof feeds, rap sessions, all this other stuff. But yeah, there were definitely some who were vindictive.
We actually had. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you go.
We actually had a staff member that used to attend Rocky Mountain Academy. She was a student there and then decided to come back to be a staff member.
I think that's where it's very strange, and what we were talking about before we started the interview about how a very small percentage of ex-residents will come forward and say that they didn't have negative experiences whilst attending these programs. And I believe personally, from what I've read, although obviously this is purely my speculation, those were the types of people that would enroll themselves as staff members in the program once they'd graduated.
I see that as kind of 50-50. Some people definitely did benefit from it, because they were having tough times in their lives and they were in danger from the things that they were doing in their life at that time. But then there's the other side of the people that, just got warped. It stuck in their mind, and that's the way life is. And they just got, sucked into it and continued their life like that.
So
I think with the program in general, because I'm torn with it too, there were some positive things, but I don't know if it was like the philosophy. I really don't know if it's that. I think being forced into a situation at a young age and having to survive it and find your inner strength, that is what I took out of it most. That and being in nature, it was beautiful.
That, Geoff, I was just going to touch on that. Yes, 100%. That was the only time I was happy there was when the Wilderness Challenge, when you live out of your backpack for 2 weeks. I did it twice, once at Ascent and once at RMA. And it was amazing because I love being outside and they didn't attack you there. These were specific people that were trained, or I guess, trained outdoorsmen people.
They were outdoor staff. They knew what they were doing because they lived in that area for a long time. So,
and it was great.
That was good, and then you were on a solo for 3 days too, where I had to dig my own snow cave in like 7 feet of snow up on these mountains, cut a little shelf in there, have a little bag of granola, basically is all they gave you, and
Gorp.
by yourself.
It was Gorp. Geoff, remember it was Gorp.
Gorp.
Yep.
So
granola, oatmeal, raisin, and peanuts.
And then there were a few M&Ms in there. Because Mike, you remember Mike, that was your little brother, Mike what was that, Garbaugh? Yes, he saved all of his M&Ms for the last, to enjoy it, and he said a pine marten stole them, which is like a little weasel.
So just explain quickly, Geoff, why you were a big brother, because obviously you didn't have a biological younger brother in the program with you.
Well, I did, like as kids came in when I was getting older, they would get assigned to the kids who have been there a little bit longer just to try and show them around and, keep an eye on them, stuff like that, But, for some people, you see them going through that tough time and remember where you were coming from, it's a lot of motivation to, definitely try and watch out for them because they don't have any parents there, and a lot of the staff are definitely not going to look out for them. And that's a really tough, lonely time.
Yeah. And are you assigned a little brother, or do you kind of just take them under your wing?
They kind of assign just to walk them through to begin with, but like then you just kind of choose.
Yeah.
Not really choose, but just take them under your wing, like you said. Yeah.
Yep.
It sounds
I
that
actually got hit. I had an ex-gang member, Tom Strelevich.
Oh, I remember
He was a
him.
hard case. Yeah, his sister went there too.
And CEDU.
And CEDU, yeah, he was a pretty rough one. He came in, he was full of piss and vinegar, and he was in my dorm too. So I had to tell him, hey, you got to straighten your stuff up. And he got all offended, shoved me, ended up punching me in the face, and ended up having, another friend of mine was there and grabbed him and knocked my friend over too. And then they took him and sent him to Ascent, until he calmed back down. But I continued, to be his big brother, and help him out.
Do you think that if Ascent wouldn't have worked for him, they would have sent him over to Provo Canyon?
Yeah, he was definitely a prime candidate.
I didn't know about Provo Canyon when I was there, Geoff. I had no clue.
Yeah, I heard the horror stories there.
I think that to me, though, Jenny, sounds as if it's because you kind of just stayed in line for the most part and kept your head down as much as you could.
You're probably right. Yeah. I didn't hear a thing about that, about the other schools. I did exactly what I was told. I was their little, I was like a spokesman, and that kills me to this day that I did that, because it's so not me. I'm always about being my own person and never a puppet. But at 12 years old, I was so terrified. That was my way to survive.
To some degree or another. If you went against the grain, they would make it. They would work to break you.
Yeah, I've got some questions about this actually, because when I was, I don't know if you've got to this part in the episode where I was speaking to Michael, Geoff, but he was put on a special assignment from his good friend, which I say with the most saturated sarcasm I can. His good friend Ross Decker, who they had a wonderful friendship and got on really well. Made him dig out a huge tree stump. Yeah,
oh,
so
yeah.
I was going to ask.
We had to do that as well. Yeah.
I got in trouble. I had to take a toothbrush and scrub a stone wall for I think a week or something like that.
And was this because you stepped out of line in some way?
Yeah, I got in trouble because there was a couple kids in my dorm who were just it was an annoying conversation. They were arguing about whose dad made more money or something like that, and I told them to just shut up. It wouldn't stop, so I ended up like hitting the wall, to try and prove a point. It was stupid, but that got back to the staff.
And you brushed a wall for a week with a toothbrush.
Yeah.
What about you, Jenny? Were you ever given a special assignment? You said before you had to dig out a tree stump as well.
That was at Ascent. Yes, I remember the pickaxe. All those tools to dig that stuff. I cut down. I remember this. I cut down 5 trees in one day. I used my energy, like my anger and like how upset I was, to cut these trees down. And I remember I saved a piece of the wood. But then we had to dig out the stumps as well. It was just because that was daily routine for 6 weeks to do that stuff. But they did put me on a full-time once at CEDU Middle School, but that was because they literally, and my mother, of all people, even said the same thing. She said they couldn't find anything, for you. Like, I didn't do anything wrong ever, but this girl put her finger in my face and just kept it there, trying to antagonize me. And I pushed it away. So I got on a full-time for that because I never did anything against the grain. I was too scared. So they tried to make that an issue.
Yeah, it sounds to me like Sheila was waiting for that moment.
Oh, my God.
What about you, Geoff? Were you ever put on bands or a full-time? I suppose when you were cleaning the wall, you were probably made to kind of isolate yourself from everybody else.
Yeah, I was on bands. I had to sit at a booth, in the main lodge area or whatever, do writing assignments. Couldn't talk to anybody else. You only talk to one staff member.
You can't smile.
No, can't smile.
No eye contact.
No.
And you've mentioned a little bit, Geoff, about taking some of the newer members or younger residents under your wing. Are either of you still in contact with any of the members that you met during that time, or do you ever, does your mind ever wander back to any of them and wonder how they're getting on?
I think about them a lot. I lost contact with everybody, unfortunately. Mainly, lives go on. I'm not really part of social media because I don't really like it or agree with it, so that would really be the only real way to really find these people, at this point in time. But yeah, I think pretty often about the people I used to know, the good people there.
And what about you, Jenny?
I was in contact with a few people for a little bit, and then I kind of faded off because that's when I was getting into drugs and stuff, and I just had always felt guilty and felt like they knew me, but they didn't know me,
Right.
Because I was their puppet, and I just felt like just so awkward talking to them and being friends because I feel like they didn't know me.
And you mentioned as well a little bit before about the sleep deprivation and the food rationing as a form of not punishment, but some of the structure of the final profit that you took part in. Was that a common theme throughout your time within any of the programs, that they would deprive you of sleep, or ration your food? I know that there were some types of clothing restrictions as well.
Oh yeah. The food, that was one of the only things that I ever did that I wasn't supposed to do. And I never got caught, but I stole food when I was at Ascent because I was so hungry. It was when I was on the course, the Wilderness Challenge, right before we were at that cabin thing. With the guy named Fox, right before we went out into the woods and with our backpacks, and I stole peanut butter and jelly because I was so hungry. I was starving because their thing was 12 hours of work, 12 hours of sleep. So 12 hours we were doing PTs, physical training, and cutting down stumps, hauling logs, all that stuff. So you get pretty hungry.
And were you ever, were you ever told that, Michael mentioned before that some people who look like they might be putting on weight would be kind of have their food portions taken down and things like that?
They would definitely monitor that stuff and watch over it. If somebody came in too thin on the other end, they would try and, push more food on them. Actual schools, like during normal days, the food was there. It was available. It was more towards profits, wilderness trips, stuff like that. And Ascent for sure. Ascent, they definitely did not give you much. When we were on our course, I guess somebody stole a jar of peanut butter. So I had no idea who did or what happened there. But when we came back, our punishment was that's all we could eat was a bowl of peanut butter at each meal for a week straight, and then no water while you're eating too.
The thing I can't get out of my mind is I will never touch the refried beans again for the rest of my life. It's a joke between my brother and my boyfriend and I, because it makes me gaggy just looking at it, because we had to eat that, and you will eat whatever they give you because you're so hungry. So I had refried beans.
Not just eating it was the cleaning.
Yeah, it was,
the bowl when you're out on the course, then it would get cold. You'd have to wipe it out and then wipe it with your finger and eat it.
And lick it clean, because you have one bowl and you don't have any water to use for it. So you have to lick it clean of these refried beans. Oh God, it makes my stomach sick. So yeah, we think about that to this day.
Yeah, interesting how different smells and foods can be triggers for people though.
Absolutely.
Do you remember having any sort of, I know that personal possessions were sort of restricted and taken away from you until you finished or graduated. But do you remember having anything personal sort of removed, like a diary taken away or anything like that?
The only thing personal I can think of is before I went to school, I gave my brother my favorite raccoon stuffed animal, and he kept that the whole time. And then he gave that to me, and then I passed that down to someone that was important to me before I left. Like, you pass on along things to your friends that, you know, mean something to you, but that's the only thing I can really think of that was personal.
Yeah, each of us had like a little tiny shelf at our bunk, and you could have a couple little things, you know, a little picture, you know, of your family or whatever. But you really didn't have much possessions. You were pretty much standard, like from commissary. You had the same clothes. You know, everything was a controlled deal.
And Michael and I were speaking about during our interview about all different types of things. We were speaking about missing kids, completing suicide, serial killers, pedophiles. Do either of you remember any of these things that happened? I know that when people talk about CEDU, they focus on these things because obviously I think serial killers and child sex abusers are more, quote, interesting, so to speak, to mainstream media than maybe the psychological abuse of children would be. So I don't like to focus too much on those things. And I know that the Lost Kids podcast focused a lot on that as well. But I think it would still be interesting for me to know whether you two experienced any of those things during your time at any of the programs.
I personally did not. I'm thankful that I never got molested or anything like that. And I do not recall the serial killer whatsoever. And I know kids would run away, but I had no clue if someone was missing for good, because, you know, sometimes they would say that the child got pulled, which means that their parents decided to bring them home.
Right.
You know, or they went to another place, or, you know, they ran away. So I had no idea what the facts were.
Right. And is that the same for you, Geoff?
It is. You know, I remember kids being put on suicide watch.
Yes.
You know, kids threatening, kids cutting themselves. But I don't recall any significant events.
Right.
You know, some of the staff, they could seem a little creepy, you know, but that was just, you know, far and few in between. And luckily, from my perspective,
it's the smush sessions that get me. I mean, it's when creepy. I watch, I did an episode on conversion therapy, and I was looking at different sort of Christian boot camps, basically, you know, sort of the pray the gay away type of mentality, where people would go to be, you know, free of their homosexuality or gender dysphoria. And it's interesting because they use scream therapy, if you can call it therapy. You know, some of the places use stress positions. And so I don't know if scream therapy is unique to CEDU, but smushing is absolutely 100% unique to CEDU.
What I think about all those things together is that they break you down, you know, make you feel like you are the biggest piece of crap in the entire world. And then you actually feel good when you leave the profits or whatever, or the raps or whatever. You feel good because it's over. And then that's when the smushing happens. Like, you're like, oh, they're kind of like, oh, you know, we're here for you. We love you. You know what I mean? So you're feeling your freedom feeling from getting away from that. And so, you know what I mean? It's all mind stuff. But
it's so creepy, isn't it?
It's creepy.
Like, when you talk about when you talk about being stripped down or broken down to kind of be rebuilt up, that is militaristic in the way that could be used. You know, Geoff said at the start, you mentioned that you found some leaflets around the house about taking you to military boot camp, and kind of being woken up in the middle of the night and being told to get your things and get in the car. That's quite militaristic. And so is needing to straighten out your bed and being screamed at in your face. But then I can't imagine in any army training where you would all sit in a big pile with your kind of instructor at the end of the day and touch each other and whisper in each other's ears like all your deepest, darkest secrets and desires. That to me is
it's creepy.
It's so creepy, isn't it? And that to me is probably the hardest thing to get I think that would be the hardest for me to deal with psychologically than having to shout at each other.
Psychologically, that was what the worst part, the psychological part. The physical part did not bother me as much because I can do the physical work. I'll do whatever you say physically. But when it comes to the mental stuff, I mean, they broke me down big time. You know, I mean, before I was sent away, when I was 12 in elementary school, I was a happy kid. I was the class clown. I played sports. You know what I mean? I had friends. So when I left and when it hit me later, like I was just so broken and I just didn't feel comfortable in my skin. They break you down. It's awful.
And the other thing with that, the other psychological thing is being in the same place, the same scene painted in my mind every single day for such a long period of time. Because you rarely left the campus.
Geoff, did you ever constantly picture yourself walking down that road, the dirt road, to leave? Yep. I thought about it every day of my life. I pictured myself doing it and wanted to do it, but I wouldn't because I was terrified of them. Yeah. All the kids would think about that. I mean, just walking down that road or someone saving you, you know, just, it was always a dream.
I would dream of somebody coming and saving me. And that was the most depressing moment, waking up, realizing that was just a dream.
Yeah. And then you're back to the reality of the horror and how many years you have left.
Yes.
It sounds isolated. And I suppose as well, in that sense, when you have those thoughts and feelings, if all the other residents are having those same thoughts and feelings, you bond over the trauma that you're then exploited to.
Yeah, it becomes your family away from your family.
Yeah. Yes. So even though you're encouraged to kind of almost spy on each other and, you know, dob each other in for raps and all that nasty stuff, you don't really have anybody else. So the smushing, I almost understand between the residents. It's when the staff get involved, that's what I don't understand. That to me is like creepy. It's almost like your abuser is trying to kind of get you to a place where it's like Stockholm syndrome.
Yes, like they tried it. Yeah, they tried it. They beat you down and break you. And then they try to say, oh, here's some love. You're okay. You know, I'll give you the love that you need since you're not getting any. Yeah. Since we don't get any love whatsoever, we have no family, nobody, no nurturing at all.
Yeah. And you're not allowed physical contact outside of these smushes. So it's.
No. And then you're laying on a staff's lap, you know, your head in their lap, you know, guy, girl. It was just, you know,
I refused for like the first week. And then like I started getting a lot of heat for it, you know, and it was frowned upon and shamed and forced, you know. So
yeah, but not only that, but if you're seeing everybody else do it and you know, you're away from you know, normal, typical, everyday life, you're out of your routine, you're miles away from home, you can't contact anybody. It's not like you have a phone with Wi-Fi where you can just phone or message anybody at any time like we would these days. You know, not that you'd be allowed to keep your phone anyway, even if you were to go to a place like that now. But if you're seeing everybody else do this after a week of being there, not only are you then faced with possible consequences and punishments where you're forbidden to make eye contact with other people, or you have sugar taken out of your diet completely, you know, you're kind of also thinking, well, if everyone else is doing it, then it must just be the normal thing.
Well, I'll tell you, you're 100% right, because even as a child, when I was 10, when they sent Geoff away. When I went up to visit him when he broke his leg, it was the first time I got to see him. I would see what was going on, and I think that was the first time I saw people smush when I was up there visiting my brother. So I had an idea of it, but it just, to me, everything that went on there, because Geoff got sent away first and I went up and visited and had seen this myself before I went, it just, in a way, it seemed like that's just how it's supposed to be. If my brother went through it and my parents are, all in, this is how it has to be. Even though I knew in my heart and hated it and thought it was so wrong and messed up, I just was like, okay, I guess this is what life's going to be. Go with the flow, do it.
Yeah, it's definitely strange. You just mentioned there that Geoff broke his leg, and I was going to ask about notable experiences that either of you had during your time in any of the programs. How did you break your leg, Geoff?
Well, it's not much free time that you get, but when you do, you can do like a sign-up thing. Some people, could go fishing or, throw a Frisbee around or something in the yard. They had this game there. It's called Seek, and you could go up on the hillside there. It's kind of like capture the flag. So, I was running from somebody. I jumped over a bush, and there was a 6-foot drop off that I didn't realize was there.
Gosh.
So I came down, my ankle completely twisted. I heard it snap. It sounded like a tree branch.
Oh, gosh.
So they had to carry me down the hillside and take me to the hospital. A half hour, 45 minutes away. They had to put a plate and 6 screws on my ankle.
That's just made my knees feel funny. That has, the way you described the sound it made. Oof.
It was a bad break. It was really bad.
Would you say that is one of the most notable experiences that you had during your time there?
No, the psychological stuff was so much deeper and more prevalent, but that experience was really depressing because I was secluded in an infirmary. I couldn't go, I couldn't really walk. And then that was the first time I got to see my sister since I was there. And then when she had to leave, it was horrible.
That is something that sticks out in my mind by far is, visiting Geoff before I was sent away. And when he had his leg broken, just to see him, like I had so much anxiety. I had a panic attack the day. I knew the day that we had to leave. I knew it was our last day there. And that whole day, I actually remember laying on the floor, crying myself, sobbing, and I fell asleep because I cried so hard because I didn't want to leave him. And it killed me to have to leave my brother there, but I couldn't express how much I missed him and how much I loved him. And it killed me that he was there.
Would you say then that those are the things that you remember the most during your time there? I mean, the thing with Paris Hilton must stick out in your mind quite a bit.
Oh, of course that does. That, to me, that's funny. You know what I mean? Because, I always explain to people, like sometimes in conversation, I'd say, oh, I met this chick, Paris Hilton. She was a model and she lived in LA and New York and had a boyfriend in LA, a boyfriend in New York. And we got in trouble together and she called my parents. Well, the first time I had seen her in a magazine since I left, I was like, oh my God, I think I was at the dentist's office. Oh my God, look, this is the chick that, I was telling you about. And now she's extremely famous. And it's just funny to me because it's like, all right, we were broken down together. We had to do PTs together. And, that was kind of cool. Not cool what we did, but wow.
Yeah. I mean, have you had any contact with her since?
No, I haven't.
And I mean, you obviously, you speak very highly of each other as brother and sister. So where does your relationship stand now? I mean, you obviously...
Yeah, my brother has always been my world ever since I was born. Always, and still is. He, as I said, he's a cornerstone in my life now and always has been. And that's, again, why I say when he got sent away, it absolutely destroyed me. First panic attack, it was just the end of my life. I felt naked without him. He always protected me, and he was always with me, and we just did everything together. Even though we're 6 years apart, we've just always been close, and I adore my brother so much.
Yeah, and we still are. We get together, weekly,
Yes.
as much as we can. She works, Jen works with my wife, so we're all pretty tight.
So yeah, you've got each other as support, and obviously it's been interesting to listen to you both remember little things simultaneously, and then go, oh yeah, oh, do you remember? So that's been quite interesting to listen to. But I know we've touched a little bit on the immediate after effect that the programs had on both of your lives, but overall, what effect do you think it's had on you? Do you carry things through now that you developed during CEDU? I know that oversharing is something that CEDU survivors find themselves doing without realizing that they're doing it, and that is quite common, I think, with cult survivors in general. Do you think there's anything in particular that you carry with you today that came from your time at CEDU?
Of course, a lot. Like, as I said, before I left, I've always been the comedian, class clown, that type of person, which I still am. Thank God I still am. But it's been horrible. The fact that I now have so much anxiety, I have nightmares, and I get uncomfortable. At one point in my life, after I left, I would be uncomfortable to even leave the house because I just felt like everybody could see through me and thinks that I'm the piece of shit that they told me I was. And just so awkward. Everything was awkward. And I just didn't even want to leave the house for a long time. But I do feel better now. I did get on medication, which helped a lot. The antidepressants and stuff for sleeping because I do not sleep well. Nightmares. My boyfriend will say that I'll yell help in my sleep and cry. But I'm telling you, my brother and my boyfriend and my son, like our tight family that we have right there, that is what has been getting me through everything, life, everything.
And do you think that that's sort of the same with you, Geoff? You carry sort of similar things with you?
Yeah, I notice a lot of things in different instances. Anxiety is definitely a big factor in my life. I've gotten better with it, but there's a lot of situations where it carries over to work, where a state of panic comes in because I'm a supervisor as well. So I have my responsibilities, and I've been doing it for a while. But, the panic-stricken feeling, if I feel unprepared, it's just like a looming thing, a haunting thing. And same with working out of town when, I'm working with people and, people get pulled to a different job, that I'm friends with and everything else. It's like that feeling that I had out at school where,
Have you heard of the CEDU Legacy website? Because I think that there is potentially a way for you to, if you were ever interested or inclined to do so, a way to contact other survivors from different year groups within CEDU, which might be worth looking into if you'd ever be interested in catching up with a few of those people you mentioned, Geoff.
Yeah, I might do that. I think I stumbled on that while I was looking through, the ample amount of content on the CEDU system on the internet. Yeah, I'll probably look into that.
And I just quickly going back to another point you made earlier, Jenny, about The Last of the Mohicans. I know it was you had a restricted library of books that you were allowed to read, and you weren't ever allowed to really watch TV unless it was football on Sundays or soccer.
Oh, that's right.
Baseball, some American sport. Right.
Yeah. I forgot about that until you said that.
So watching a film must have actually been a bigger deal than some listeners might have realized when you mentioned it.
It was a huge deal. I mean, everything that you could ever imagine, all the things that you can do daily in life, they were all taken away from you. So to see a movie was just great. It's almost like a break from that reality that you had to go through,
Mhm.
you know, and I enjoy movies very much. Like, I'm a movie freak. So to me, it was like heaven being able to watch The Last of the Mohicans.
So
Yeah,
there was
I guess one time
no
a week they would
TVs.
show a movie.
Yes.
They-
Yeah.
right?
Yep. One time a week they would show a movie, and it was
Um,
their pick. It would be so random. Like, they actually played a horror movie, which is one of my favorites. I can't think of it, but anyways, and then they play something more like Rudy. You know, it was just so different, the things that they would pick, but you enjoy it. You know what I mean? It's one time you get to watch television.
Yeah. So there's no regular TV. There's no internet.
Not at all.
You have a restricted library to pick from in terms of books.
Yep.
Yes.
It's just very there's just a lot of cult methods of control used within the entire structure itself. And when I spoke to Michael, I asked him whether he felt like the staff themselves had been indoctrinated into this cult for children, and he said yes. So I just wonder what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think there's some true believers out there for sure. You know, they stayed there as their job after going through that system, and they either had to agree with it and embrace it, or move on and go somewhere else. So, any long-termers are definitely well embedded in the whole structure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can definitely tell them apart. There was one staff member that actually lived on campus because he needed a home, you know.
Yeah.
So he actually lived on campus. He had a dog.
Was that Kip?
Oh no, it wasn't. Did Kip live there? I do recall Kip, but
yeah, he lived there.
I remember Kip. Did he have a Wisconsin accent or something?
Yeah, he
Yes.
was a good guy.
He liked you. Yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
remember. He liked you, and that was the hard part for me, was that I had to live up to my brother's expectations because he went there before me and everybody loved Geoff. You know what I mean?
Right.
They would kind of
Yeah.
throw that in my face as well. But, you know, yeah, that's kind of what they would try to focus on with me because, yeah, that's it. All they could focus on, really.
And if you were to have the opportunity to be able to speak to any of the staff members now, what do you think you would say to them?
I'd have all the questions that you're asking us. You know, what really drove them to even get into something like this, and what made them stay. You know, what they agreed with and what they didn't agree with.
Do you think it would be the same for you, Jenny?
No, not at all. I'm just going to put it to you this way. There wouldn't be much talking. Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
think that you'd use it as an opportunity to get out sort of all the pent-up anger and anxiety that you've had over the last however many years?
From all the abuse I took when I was 12 years old and on, yeah, hey, now it's fair game. Now I'm an adult,
Mm-hmm.
you know, so now try it. You know what I mean? Try it now on me. I have a lot of anger for certain people.
I mean, there are still schools, I say the term loosely when it comes to talking about CEDU itself. There are still schools, programs, wilderness programs, boot camps that operate purely for quote unquote troubled teens. They are operating throughout the world as we speak. What would be your advice for people coming out of these types of programs and having to ultimately instantly readjust to normal life?
The best thing that worked for me, and it's only been later in life, like I had to go through it. It didn't hit me until I was in my 20s about what had happened, and it didn't affect me until then. But the best thing that worked for me, because I really do feel a lot better now. You know, I talked to my doctor, you know, the right medication. I'm not saying you have to be all, you know, doped up on drugs, but, you know, if you need something for anxiety, take that. Listen to your doctor, because I was always against it. And also talking to someone that you feel comfortable with about it. You know, someone that won't judge you, someone that understands. You have to talk about it. And I'm just so thankful that I have my brother who understands and went through it as well.
Yeah. Is that sort of similar to what you would say, Geoff?
It is. It's a tough thing to really get anyone to understand who hasn't gone through it. Just the depth to it, the day-to-day, the stringent schedule and the in and outs of the whole thing. Yeah, so I'm glad.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not glad we went through this.
Right, I agree.
Together we can bounce it off of each other.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to ask a difficult question, which Jenny, you're going to disagree with as soon as I ask it, but I'm just interested in what Geoff would say. Because you were trying drugs and you were sent to Ascent for those reasons, have you ever blamed yourself for your sister being sent into these programs as well?
Yeah, I have some guilt with that. My doing put the fear into my parents that made the choice quick and easy to do that with her.
But
I mean,
Geoff, please don't think that, because honestly, you know how they are. They are very, you know how they are. Don't ever do that. Please don't.
I don't think there is any level of responsibility at all. It would just be interesting to kind of, from an outsider's perspective, try to understand how intrinsic all the different thoughts and emotions would be around it, and how you would kind of unravel them into, like, I picture these types of situations as like a ball of yarn that's all, or like your headphones when you put them in your pocket and then they're instantly just all tangled up and in one giant knot. And it's so difficult to try and unravel it all and get them all just kind of like straightened out and chronological and neat, because people's brains don't work like that after stress and trauma. Nothing is sort of chronological anymore. Nothing is ABC or black and white. Everything is sort of, you remember parts of things, and you get memories mixed up and confused with each other. So I just wanted to play devil's advocate a little bit and see what your answer would be.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you really think about it, she never would have went if it wasn't for my choices to get there, but it wasn't intended or anything like that. But it's in the back of my mind sometimes.
What do you think can be done now to stop further abuse and exploitation of children in these situations?
Well, what you're doing right now is the best way, because people do not know. They were glorifying all this stuff back in the day with on Montel Williams shows and Sally Jesse Raphael. They had all this stuff going on at that time, and it showed
Geoff,
it was a one-sided story.
Speaking of Montel Williams, his daughter went there. I was friends with her, Ashley, and I met Montel when he came up to visit. He was very sweet.
So he would have been an advocate for the program as well if he was personally invested in it at the time, not realizing, of course, what was really going on.
He had no idea what went on, and I really think he's a good man. It's a shame that they had the blindfolds over their eyes, because he would never do anything to hurt his daughter.
It's hard to know. I mean, it's great that people are starting to talk about it, and Paris Hilton is such an iconic person that she's going to bring a whole other type of listener into raising awareness for these things, but almost as well, when it shouldn't be this way, but she's also going to add the exposure that she can bring to it. It almost confirms for people on the outside that these things are real, just because she's such a famous person and she's saying that these things happen to her. There'll be so many people that will turn around now and go, oh, well, it must be true if a famous person is going on the record to say it.
Absolutely.
It's a creditable voice now for this topic that's been, under wraps for a long time.
Hopefully
and
people can
there'll
just
be more accountability to these other programs that still exist, the more that's exposed.
I'm so thrilled that she's doing it because yes, people will listen to her. She's very famous, and she can use that for a good thing, a good cause, to help stop this going on with these kids. Like, I would give anything to stop it and save these kids, because that's all I wanted, is for someone to save me and help me, and for my brother. So I think that this going public could help. But again, I worry because I think government's involved. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked a little bit about this with Michael, because the extent of the programs and the amount of tangents that have come from CEDU itself and the troubled teen industry is such a huge thing that has just been around for so long, and it's almost unbelievable that once a program is taken to court because of allegations of abuse, it's almost like they just rebrand themselves, give themselves a new name, get a new board of directors in, or and then just start again.
That's exactly it. That's what I read about, is that they shut down. They claim bankruptcy, which is insane because they got obscene amounts of money from the parents.
Yeah.
But it was because there were lawsuits. The kids, some of the kids and their parents filed lawsuits, so they had to shut down. But then they reopened under a different name, and they also moved the kids and the staff from RMA to BCA. And
that's Boulder Creek Academy.
Yes, and then just continued
carry on. Yeah, and that's not the only place that's happened with. There's a number of different programs. There's like Teen Inc. and Kids Inc. and then they change their names when there's allegations of abuse, and then they just carry on, sometimes with exactly the same staff as well, who were the ones being accused in the first place of these things. So it's hopefully this is a huge, massive pit of worms that we're just taking the lid off of slowly. And the more people that come forward and talk about these things, the more, the more you can be discredited. And nobody can turn around now and say to you two, Geoff, you said you hadn't even finished listening to the interview with me and Michael, yet you've told me things that he mentioned to me off the record that you wouldn't have heard in the interview. So how can so many people suddenly come forward and say all of these things happened to us, and we've never met each other before, and we've never spoken before, but we all have the same stories, and we can all name the same staff? People can't deny it. It's getting to that stage now where they won't be able to put the lid back on this. And
it's all facts. And the thing is, the strange thing is how local authorities were somehow told to take a back seat.
Yes.
Yeah, that's another thing as well, how these places are left to almost self-police when kids are going missing and never seen again, or completing suicide, where staff are not having background checks done and are not even qualified to be in the positions that they are in. And then the staff who are not 100% sold on the program, they still don't come forward and whistle blow to people. I know some people did go to local authorities and report abuse, and then welfare services would come up, and then other staff that were fully invested in the program would say, well, we'll just relook at our policies, and then send them a piece of paper to say that they'd relooked at their policies.
It's always swept under the carpet.
It took a riot for it to all come out, because authorities were not able to turn a blind eye to that, because there were several people hurt, and that happened just before I graduated. That happened at NWA when I was getting close to graduating at RMA.
And then it happened at RMA, Geoff, after I left a few years, and that's what ended up shutting it down.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yep.
It's crazy, isn't it? It's crazy. Hopefully more people will just keep coming forward and talk. I mean, I've gone through all the points on my list. I don't know if there was anything that either of you wanted to add or share before we finish our call today.
Geoff?
I'm thankful for the opportunity to do this, to, get some of this stuff out. Like I said, I've kept a lot of it in, kind of blocked a lot of it out. It's a good avenue for people to find that they're not alone.
Yeah, I think we've only managed to kind of scratch the surface or look at the tip of the iceberg with the experiences and things that happened to you both whilst you were under the umbrella of CEDU. I'm sure there are just hours and hours of things that we could speak about and go through, but I didn't know if there was anything you wanted to add, Jenny.
Just that I'm glad that it's getting attention now, that I'm hoping that it will stop what's going on for these kids. That's like my main thing. I don't want this to happen to anybody else ever again. And it just, how it really messed up my life and my mind.
So there's the hashtag #BreakCodeSilence, which is the hashtag that was introduced in the Paris Hilton documentary, which is all about whistleblowing and talking through these experiences and not letting abusers remain unaccountable for the things that they've done. So for anybody that would be interested, definitely go and check that out. That's hashtag #BreakCodeSilence. Paris Hilton's documentary is available on YouTube as well. If you type in Paris Hilton, it's the first thing that comes up. If you go back to my previous episodes or visit the CEDUlegacy.com website, there are loads of different memoirs and videos and testimonies that you can read through, as well as lots of different resources that people can access if they are struggling with any experience from being a part of the troubled teen industry, or just generally curious to find out a little bit more if you were not a part of the troubled teen industry. So I've gone through all of my points, and if you're both happy with that, then I'm happy with that too.
Yes, I'm happy. Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, thank you, Casey.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
No, it's honestly my pleasure to be able to sit here and give people a chance to be listened to for maybe even the first time. I know you two have each other, which has been lovely to listen to over the last hour or so. Actually, one last question before we finish. How do you think your mum would react if she listened to this interview?
Well, that's the funny thing, is that, like, with our mom, it would be great to have her listen to it, and I think maybe she would understand some, because she's kind of, starting to turn and understand, because I've sent her things about Paris Hilton.
Yeah, I sent her the Lost Kids podcast. I don't know if she even touched it, though.
I don't think she did, Geoff, because I asked her before, and she just doesn't want to face it. But our father, there is no way he would sit and spend the time to listen to us for an hour. There's no way.
It's just, it's interesting, isn't it? I was just wondering what you thought how she might react.
But that's one of the main things for me, is that, like, I just want them to acknowledge, especially like our father, like, do you not see? Yeah, acknowledge. Just listen. That's it. Give us an hour of this to listen.
Yeah.
Just realize that this was not some astute plan to bash this thing that happened. This just facts. These things did happen.
Right.
Yeah. Well, who knows? Maybe one day he'll come to you and say that he had listened to it and he thought it was interesting. So maybe. I'm gonna end the call there. That you think we've missed out. I usually do a short intro and outro to these episodes, so I'd be more than happy to add anything in. Hopefully, I know we were cutting in and out at the first half of the interview, but hopefully I can do some editing and clean that up a little bit without losing too much of the really good information that you were both sharing with me. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing these experiences. I know they're difficult to speak about, and I know that they're difficult to relive, but from my interview with Michael, you have no idea how many people messaged me just to say thank you and how much it helped them. So you two will be doing so much you'll be helping so many people just by speaking through it. And I know, Jenny, it's from what I could hear, it's been difficult for you to speak through. I just really appreciate it. I'm somebody you've never met before, and you're trusting me with things that are difficult and personal. So I'm just, from the bottom of my heart, I'm just really thankful that you would let me pick your brains and listen to everything. So thank you so much.
No, thank you, Casey.
Yeah,
I know we both appreciate it. I can speak for both of us because I know, Geoff, we both appreciate this, and the fact that you're listening and you're trying to do something about it, and make our words valued. You know what I mean? So we do appreciate it. It's not easy to talk about, but I'm just glad that you're interested and that you want to help people, and that's great.
All right.
Thank you so much,
Take
Casey.
care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Jenny and Geoff both reached out with extra information that came to them after our conversation had concluded, and I asked if it would be okay to share those parts with you today. Geoff emailed saying, "Hi Casey, hope all is well with you and your family. Since our call, I've had several more instances of variation pop into my head, so I figured I'd share them with you. First thing, in relation to staff and sharing disclosures, I had one staff member that was part of a family or team that I was on. He would talk in raps and in general public while sharing his story that he'd do an immense amount of cocaine and drink a fifth of Jack Daniels, then have sex with his wife while grabbing her hair so often that she developed a bald spot. The same guy also shared that he had once witnessed another guy rape his wife at gunpoint while he stood by and watched. Another situation that popped into my mind related back to the boot camp Ascent in Naples, Idaho. I know Jenny and I related back to you about having to clean our bowls by hand when out on the 2-week wilderness expedition, incorporated with the boot camp experience. In actuality, I remember having to clean the large cooking pot that fed everyone. 2 of us had to scrape every cold, pasty ounce of refried beans with our fingers and eat everything we scraped off. We also had to take turns carrying around the trash bag of waste paper used to wipe after each person had defecated. It was one general bag that each person took with them when they had to go, and each kid spent at least one day hiking with that bag being our responsibility to carry. At Ascent, we only were able to shower 1 time a week, or once every 2 weeks, I can't quite remember which, but we'd hike and shower in the cold water while the staff watched. I'm sure there's plenty more that I've stuck way back in my memory, and as time goes by, with revisitation to these portions of my life, it's resurfacing. I've just locked it away over the years because I felt no one would really understand other than the individuals that have gone through this. Luckily, my sister and I have each other to bounce these things off of. Biggest things I've thought about and brought to light since our conversation is the lasting effects that I've kept to myself out of lack of understanding. I spoke to you about trying to look after some of the kids as I had been looked after when I arrived by some other students with good souls. The feeling of responsibility to protect or try to guide, I find it directly connects with my work the older I get in the company and business I work in and for. It's a tough trade with a very throw-to-the-wolves mentality. I find myself guiding and protecting younger employees that are good and hard-working, trying to keep them from being taken advantage of and lied to, exposing department heads in sometimes falsified promises or downplaying dangers and lack of safety equipment in the workplace. The new guys don't have the voice or confidence to stand up in certain situations. Another part, which I believed I touched on in our conversation, was when I'm out on a job out of town from my family for weeks at a time and over months. People commiserate together and bond sometimes in times of seclusion from home life. They become family away from family. The feeling when some people are pulled off a job ends up feeling like kids are going home and me being stuck there. As stupid and juvenile as that sounds, it's not jealousy for having to stay, but part of your group leaving you. Also, in relation to working away from home, is the tremendous guilt I feel being away from my children and my wife. Even though I know I'm doing everything in my power to ensure their livelihood, I fear them feeling abandoned like I did. That sits with me deeper than anything, and I'm surprised I keep doing it, but it supplies a good life and earning for the people I'm closest to. Jenny also reached out to say, I was 12 when I left Ascent in Idaho, then went to CEDU middle school at 12 years old. As you can see in some of these photos of me, I was on top of a mountain with nowhere to run. The cliffs at the edge of the school were very, very steep. You can see the clouds below us where the cities are. We would also have quite a few major fires around our school, on the other mountains around us. We would see the airplanes drop the coloured stuff they used to put these huge fires out. We were never evacuated, even though many around us, outside of the school, had done so themselves. There was never a safety plan, nothing. They didn't even talk with us about it. CEDU Middle was not as intense as the boot camp and RMA, but it was still very frightening for a 12-year-old, let alone anyone of any age. In the beginning, my parents told me I would be gone for 1.5 years, which is when I would complete Ascent in CEDU Middle School. 2 months before my graduation from CEDU, my parents told me they were sending me to RMA in Idaho, where my brother was. They had to wait until I was at the very least 14 years old to send me there because it was a high school. So on my 14th birthday, they told me I would be leaving the very next day to go to RMA, to further my emotional growth education, which added another year plus, around 1.5 more years to be exact, even though I behaved exactly as I was told the entire time. Another thing about CEDU Middle, I never did anything bad while I was there. They couldn't find anything that was real to beat me down about. So one day, this girl was standing right in front of me and pointed her finger less than an inch from my eyeball. She stood there and did it for over a minute. I said, "Knock it off, get away from me and stop." I swiped her finger out of my face. Not hard, I didn't get violent or even swear. And for that, they put me on a full-time to try and show my parents I'm not good all of the time. There's a picture of my mother and myself. You can see the full-time book. And that I was not allowed to smile or have any physical contact, and other punishments were given to me as well. No one was allowed to make eye contact with me, talk to me, smile at me. They completely isolated me and tore me apart in every rap session. Then they had the other staff and kids join in. Funny how they let me have a visit from my parents at the time of punishment, when it wasn't time for everyone else to have visits at the same time. I think they had come up to see me like that because it looked like I really badly needed the program, because I was angry and violent and had issues and anger problems that needed to be corrected. Even my mother, who was law-abiding, follows blindly with other things, and told me she felt bad for me because they explained the entire situation, without lying to my parents, said exactly what I told you about what happens. She said they did that because I've never been in trouble before, and they were punishing me because they had nothing on me. I thought that would be a huge sign to my mother that something isn't right. But it wasn't. She still followed blindly and sent me away for another 1.5 years just because the staff recommended it to them and said I would benefit even more from RMA. I guess the only other major thing I can think of was that I was the youngest in history of RMA to graduate from that place. As I said, they skipped me a whole grade of education to send me to RMA high school, so it was obvious that it was very messed up of my parents and that place, especially because I didn't need any emotional growth help or prevention. I was stung by a wasp in my sleep in my bed at RMA, and it was in the middle of winter. I called the night watch person to come into my dorm, and we both found the wasp in my bed, alive. I'm very allergic to bee stings, and my parents had given the staff an EpiPen. I told them I'm allergic and I need my shot. They killed the wasp, took it up to the office and left it under a glass for the day or regular staff to see it really happened. The night staff did not watch over me and they did not give me my EpiPen. Then I told the usual day staff and they never gave it to me, even though they had it. So over 5 god-awful days my arm got bigger and bigger, and I swear to you it was at least double in size. It hurt and it itched and it kept me awake in pain every night. My skin felt like it was going to split wide open. Finally, they took me to the local hospital. It looked like the type you see in horror or zombie movies, completely deserted. I only remember seeing the doctor that examined my arm. They wouldn't let the doctor prescribe anything, so I went straight back to RMA and into a 3-long-hour rap. Lovely. The last thing I can think of is how they made me squeeze into a child-sized tutu. I mean like an 8-year-old size, along with the smallest ballet slippers. They told me I need to get into the outfit. I told them I can't because it's way too small. They said make it work. So I squeezed my feet so tight into the slippers that it actually made it quite painful, and a tutu that made me half naked because it was so small. They told me that I needed to fly and prance around the room and act like Tinkerbell from Pinocchio. They said I have to keep doing it until I have some type of breakthrough. The breakthrough was whenever we seemed completely comfortable and found our personality. I had to keep faking some creepy things that didn't make sense. It took so many hours until we could move on to the next horrible breakthrough. I know it took over 8 straight hours for all of us to be exactly what the staff wanted. Over and over, dancing in that little piece of clothing and cramming my toes that were halfway curled under my foot just to be in the slipper, dancing and running around, putting fake pixie dust on people. That's some of the story of Jenny and Geoff. Next week, we will be continuing with testimonies from CEDU before hearing from ex-residents of different troubled teen programs that follow the same abuse and barbaric treatment of children that we have become familiar with from CEDU. Remember to follow #BreakingCodeSilence to finally get these stories and people held accountable for. Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to get in touch, you can do so by emailing me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com or follow me on Twitter and Instagram at cultvaultpod. I'm your speaker, Casey, and this has been the Cult Vault.